of the people who are registered are now in attendance. And so let me begin. I'm Jordan Sheff. I'm the Commissioner at the Department of Developmental Services for those of you on the call today who I haven't met. I'm really glad to have this opportunity. Since prior to the pandemic, prior to COVID, I was able to get out and about and do a number of these types of forums for providers, staff, and individuals supported and families. And then the pandemic sort of broke our trend there, although we did a couple during the pandemic that were more presentation style. That was true also last year, where we did some presentation. I did some presentation style meetings like this that were followed up by some question and answer discussion groups that were held regionally and also virtually. This year we did things a little differently. So I'm hoping that prior to showing up to visit with us today for some question and answers, you were able to watch. There were 3 videos in the invitation link, one by myself, one by Deputy Commissioner Velardo, who I'll introduce in a moment, and one by former Deputy Commissioner Peter Mason, who's come back to help us with some planning around ARPA funding. And the reason we started last year, we were sort of in the end of most of the most significant waves of COVID, and had an opportunity. We knew that we would be applying for some funding and wanted to start to have some conversations around what we might do to change the system, to transform the system. And somewhere along the line, those conversations got coined as Planting the Seeds of Change Tour. We don't have a catchy name for this year. Maybe we'll name it afterwards. But this year we tried to do things a little differently, as we have ARPA funding now in play, the American Rescue Plan Act, and already have a number of stakeholder meetings and committee meetings, sorry, not stakeholder meetings, committee meetings, working on a variety of things, and we'll introduce a little bit more of that later. But that's the purpose of today. Hopefully you've watched the video. If you haven't, you can go back and watch it later. I'm going to do a couple minutes of some introductions of some things now, but we hope to use most of the time this morning for conversation and question and answer. So let me begin. There's as much as we are working on transformation and transition in our service delivery system, there have been a number of transitions in leadership at DDS since the start of since the last time I was able to visit with you in this manner. So first, I'm going to take a minute to introduce Deputy Commissioner Elisa Velardo, formerly the North Region Regional Director. Elisa, you want to come on and say hi?
Hi, everyone.
And she'll be back to talk a little bit more in just a couple of minutes. And then I also wanted to take a minute now. In this meeting is hosted as a South Region forum, although there will be some crossover based on people's availability and what worked for their calendar. But as we're in the South Region, last year at this time, Cress Saccaroli was our Regional Director for our public programs, and today I wish to introduce him to you as our South Region Regional Director, and ask him to say a few words, introduce himself, and if he has any key staff on the call with him today, he'd also like to introduce. Cress?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Hello, everybody. My name is Cress Saccaroli. I'm the new Regional Director in the South Region, as the Commissioner noted. Just a little bit about myself. I've worked for the department for almost 30 years, and I volunteered for the department for more than a decade before that. Very fortunate to come to the South Region from my previous roles in the department with a very competent, capable group of fellow leaders and staff. Been making my tours around the various offices and meeting various stakeholder groups, providers, families, individuals, employees. We have another new leader in the South Region. That's Brian Smith. He's the Assistant Regional Director for the Individual and Family Support Division. He is not able to join us today, but we, besides that, management team in the South region, including Kathy Kalo, the private ARD, Jorge Munez, the health services director, Denise Palladino, our self-determination director, and others like Maribeth Santasaro, Don Racinas, are all still here. And so we have a very vibrant leadership for the South region, and we're really looking forward to supporting all those on this call, all our stakeholders, our families, individuals, providers, employees. So that's what I have, and I look forward to meeting and working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm sure you'll have more to add as the conversation proceeds. There's a few other introductions I'd like to make just because they're key staff changes, including the establishment of 2 positions. On the call with us today, and I'll ask her to come off camera just to say hi real quick, is Dr. Cheryl Ellis, who is our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director. And she is working on those issues both internally and externally on behalf of the department. Dr. Ellis, do you want to come on and say hi real quick?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And I am happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here to join us. Thank you. And I don't believe he's on the call today, but there's also a new position for us, the Director of Strategic Planning and Emergency Services, a gentleman named Jake Mankey. And Jake, if you're out there, feel free to come on and say hi real quick. We learned during the pandemic that having a centralized position for emergency management and other planning is really important for the department. He has joined us with a strong background in all things safety, planning, and emergency. And so we're happy to have him join the team. And then one other introduction real quick today, while not an establishment, Shannon Giacovino was appointed by the governor as the ombudsperson for the Department of Developmental Services. And Shannon, I don't know if you want to say a quick hello and introduce yourself real quick. That'd be great.
Sure. My name is Shannon Giacovino, and in addition to being the ombudsperson, I'm also a family member, and I've been a lifelong advocate for people with IDD. My position is written into statute. I am here for individuals and families to be a resource to help you resolve issues. I'll put my information in the chat, so feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Much appreciated. And then one other introduction. Patricia West, who had been the Assistant Regional Director in Public, has taken on the lead role as Regional Director for our Public Services following Cress's transition to the South region. And if we have any families, case managers, staff, or providers working with public, I wanted to let you know that Patricia is on the call today, and I don't know if you're in a place where you can come on and say hi or not, Patricia.
I can say hi, Jordan, if you can hear me, but I can't seem to figure out how to come on camera.
Well, it's good to hear your voice, and we did hear you. And if any questions come up that around public, we can talk more later. But thank you for joining the call today.
No problem.
So I'm watching the clock. I want to leave plenty of time for question and answer. So I'm going to do a very abbreviated sort of a talk through some of the quick talking points about why we're doing what we're doing. So first of all, I want to make mention first and foremost, I think the thing most affecting everything we do these days is the workforce crisis that DDS is facing both internally, all of our private providers, all the direct hiring practice, and it's pervasive throughout all service sectors and all industries. And so we are mindful of that as we proceed through that discussion, the discussion today, that is certainly on forefront in everybody's mind. When we started this conversation last year, there were some ideas about what we might consider doing that are being discussed at some of those stakeholder tables today. And that was the consideration of how we utilize group homes and who may live there and how we may use them going forward, how we use and leverage assistive technology and remote supports, At the time, we were getting ready to go live with a number of our mixed-use affordable housing projects, some of which are online now. So those were some of the ideas, but I wanted to be really clear. This wasn't intended to be a discussion about how we eliminate or end the use of group homes, just a consideration of how we might use them differently. But this is not to say that we're getting out of the group home business. It also is not a suggestion that we'll be looking to close large congregate day settings or other day programs or eliminate services. It's not necessarily about completely ending the wait list. And the use of assistive technology is not about replacing people with robots. I don't want people to jump to conclusions. This is really about expanding the continuum of supports that DDS offers so that we can provide the right service at the right time, at the right price to the right people. And the question I get most often as we're talking about this now is this the right time? Given the workforce crisis, and my response to that would simply be, if not now, then when? I don't see an immediate end to this workforce crisis, and some of the things that we may discuss may alleviate the stress and strain that the workforce crisis has put on us. So I think it's actually not only is it not inopportune, I think it's a pretty opportune time to be really working through and dedicating time and resources to those conversations. And we're continuing to work on the workforce development in a number of ways. Hopefully we'll have some news in the new year about some key positions that can assist with that. But in the meantime, we continue to engage with the Office of Workforce Strategies and the Governor's Workforce Council, and really looking at how we use this infusion of money from the ARPA to stabilize the private provider community and help them during this workforce crisis. And with that, I know that one of the things that we talked about last year with regards to employment was our involvement in the state supported employment leadership network. It's a national program, and I'm going to ask Elisa to come on now and talk just a little bit about her work there.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll introduce myself again, Elisa Velardo, Deputy Commissioner at DDS, and it's really, really wonderful to see everyone here today. In my role, I've been working very closely with the employment and day support team, and there's lots of really good work happening in this area. If you watch the video, some of this is outlined in the video that was attached to the link, but I'll just give a little overview. Back in 2019 and 2020, DDS worked with the State Employment Leadership Network, also known as SELN, and that's a joint project between the Institute of Community Inclusion at UMass Boston and NASDS, the National Association of State Directors of Developmental Disability Services. And we worked with SELN to complete a very thorough state strategic employment assessment. We looked deeply within our service system to identify what's in place as far as Connecticut's infrastructure around employment. We had focus groups. We had, some of you may have even participated in some of those focus groups. And that resulted in a report that was generated in February of 2021. It's the Connecticut DDS Findings and Observations Report. And that gave us a roadmap in terms of how we could strengthen opportunities regarding competitive integrated employment outcomes. And since that time, our Employment and Day Services Division has been working with the Commissioner's Office to implement some of the recommendations that were in that report. We created an advisory committee and 7 subcommittees that are each focused in particular areas that, that relate to employment. And I'll just outline what those subcommittees are. There's one focused on leadership. One is focused on strategic goals and operating policies. There's financing and contract methods, training and technical assistance, interagency collaboration, services and service innovations, and employment performance measures, quality assurance, and program oversight, which has a pretty cool acronym. They've been going by EPM, QA, PO. And we're in the process of convening an additional subcommittee on transportation. So if anyone is interested in participating in the transportation subcommittee and has really good ideas about how we might expand transportation options across the state, please feel free to reach out to me. We're just in the process of convening that subcommittee. So these subcommittees have been in effect for about 9 months now. We just had our Q3 report this week. We've already begun to implement some of the recommendations. You're going to hear quite a bit about customized employment in the months ahead. Customized employment is a proven process for supporting people who want to be employed but have not yet been successful in identifying employment that works for them. And it's very successful for people who have more complex needs. And there's funding available for people that qualify. So if you know of someone that's interested or you're interested, you would contact your case manager. They'll reach out to the employment and day support team, and we will work together around customized employment opportunities. So that's what's happening in the area of employment. I also wanted to share a little information about a series of forums that we've been hosting each month. And the series is called the Fourth Tuesday Forums on Innovative Services. And they occur on the fourth Tuesday of the month from 3 to 4:30. And each month there's a different topic. The series started in July of this year, and we've been hosting forums on supportive housing, IHS, or individualized housing support options. And this month, the topic was assistive technology. Upcoming forums for October will be community companion homes. November will be on customized employment. And in December, we'll talk about remote supports. And the forums really, it's consistent and it's worked really, really well. We have folks from DDS that can speak on the topic, give a little overview. We've had experts from our sister agencies. We've had people from the Department of Housing and Disability and Aging Services that we work closely with. We have exciting advances from the provider community that are highlighted each month. And I think most importantly, we hear firsthand from individuals and families around how this service option is having an impact on their lives. And that really seems to have resonated with people to just hear or see. This month, assistive technology, we had a young man, Jacob, that really demoed the assistive technology that he uses in his apartment. And it was pretty amazing to see. So I'm in the process of identifying the topics for the first half of 2023. Some thoughts include self-direction, individual and family support options, children's services, clinical services, other employment options, shared living. But I'm also interested in hearing from you as far as additional topics that may be of interest. And so you can drop some thoughts in the chat, or we may talk about other areas that we might want to feature as we're looking at different innovative options. So that is what I have. I will turn it back to the commissioner.
Thank you, Elisa, much appreciated. So just a quick comment right now is that you are the guinea pigs for these presentations, and what we're covering so far has taken a little longer than I thought it would. I want to assure you all that we'll have time for all your questions, even though it's only slated for an hour today. If we run long, we will stick around to answer any of those questions, and don't feel rushed. And we'll talk internally about whether we maybe need to bump these out to 90 minutes. But I'm just going to just a couple more quick highlights, and then I'm going to turn the dialogue over to all of you who've come out to attend today. I had mentioned the ARPA work. I want to let you know that it's all of what we're doing there is posted on our website. we can provide links to that in the chat today and make sure it's provided to you in a follow-up email. I also want to mention that today is being recorded. So if you learn something from today or want to share something from today with others in your community, that you'll be able to access these recordings and share the link for those. But in terms of ARPA, as I said, more information is available on our website. Day and residential transformational committees have been stood up and are functioning, have met multiple times and are working on a list of draft incentive recommendations for both residential and day. And that the individual and family engagement committees are also up and running. Both have met multiple times and are looking at some of the work other committees are doing and providing their input. And there's staff survey has gone out with regards to individuals and families in that committee work. They're looking at support options with DDS staff and providers and subject matter experts. So there is a lot of work going on. There are ways to get involved or to learn more about what it is we're doing. So with that, I want to turn the floor over to all of you who came out to attend today. Kevin and Joe, who are helping facilitate these community conversations on my behalf, are here to assist me so that I don't get too distracted going in and out of the chat and looking for references, the questions and subjects. So you can either put your question in the chat if you're comfortable raising your hand. In the bottom of your screen, there should be a reactions emoji. And if you click on that, there's a raise hand function associated with that button. You can raise your hand if you want to just ask it. And I know that there was one comment already in the chat, Kevin, if you want to help facilitate that.
Sure. I have a question from, there's actually two. So I'll start with the first one. I have a question from Denise. She says, "Hi, Jordan. In regards to housing, I want to add something and wasn't sure if you were taking comments anytime during this meeting." So I guess if Denise wants to unmute herself and ask the question.
Hi, happy Friday, everybody. I'm Denise Ricker. I've been with the agency for probably, it'll be 16 years next month. And I've stayed in IFS case management the whole time. I remember way back in the day, Cress and I used to go to lunch back when he was, a lower man on the totem pole. And we used to talk about all the great things that, were up and coming for DDS. Through the years, I've had a particular interest in housing. Being an IFS, we're certainly limited. And back, I want to say, like maybe 8 years ago, we had a creative housing committee. And I believe I was the only case manager on that for the state. And it involved Liz Favret, Greg McMahon, Marie Bennett back at the time, who was wonderful. And it also involved the Connecticut Family Network. And April DiPolino was very much involved. We had cafes, that was kind of how we did it, and went around the state and introducing this new creative concept of creative housing. I feel like personally, I haven't heard much about it in years since our committee kind of went to the wayside, because we were really involved and a lot of things were happening, but then we were trying to figure out how to kind of hand it off to, I don't know, others to keep pursuing things. And so we did hand it off to the Connecticut Family Network. And we went to meetings once in a while, but then they would usually direct all their questions to us. Because I think families and parents feel like they need our direction or our funding in order to make any movement. And in this time where there's a lot going on with wait lists, I think it's better for us to be able to give families and parents hope as far as being creative and not just looking at DDS for funding, and to know that they don't have to wait to hear from somebody on some committee to say whether or not their child can move. And I was trying to encourage them that, you know, this allows them to be in control of their future, and that's really exciting. But the thing is that a lot of people don't know how to go about that. And so I was just wondering, I'm extremely creative when it comes to any of our, whether it's employment, housing, whatever. I've had people that parents have died and I've been able to keep them in their own homes, stuff like that. But I don't see that in a lot of other, I don't want to say case managers, but I don't see that in a lot of other areas of people
Yeah.
trying to be creative, or they don't know that they can be. And I'm just wondering how we can kind of do a little bit more with that.
Thanks, Denise. You covered a lot of ground there. So let me do a couple things real quick. And I appreciate the question and the filling in. First of all, Adriana from Connecticut Family Support Network is on the call with us today. And they very often have joined these conversations, and not just one. They often are present for a number of these, so they can connect with as many families as possible. For our families on the call today, I think there's some contact information we can put in the chat box if you want to learn more about Connecticut Family Support Network, who gets some of their funding through us to help facilitate some of these types of conversations and to help families navigate what's a pretty complex set of systems here in Connecticut across multiple state agencies. So Adriana, thanks for joining us this morning. And I do know that they've continued their work on looking at creative housing. There a couple of the recommendations out of some of those early creative housing conversations are how we landed with some work around shared living. Let me begin by saying our current work on shared living, while I appreciate the efforts of our staff to put together some guidelines and some rules around this concept, and it's a funded service through the waiver, as we are prone to do, not intentionally, but as we are prone to do, we have overcomplicated what I was hoping would be something simple. When Crest took on the role in the South region, he asked, as the regional directors often have a project or two that they take on as their own, revamping and streamlining shared living, I believe is one of the ones Crest and I talked about. So that was one of the concepts that came out of some of those cafe style conversations. And the advent of our shared housing, the I-dash housing, what we call I-dash housing, mixed use, low income, affordable housing that includes people with intellectual and developmental disability in them, was another one of those. But I think that you're right, Denise. One of the hard parts, and you highlighted this well, and my staff are going to try and help me when I acronym through my conversation with you today to provide explanations for those acronyms in the chat, and feel free to help me reel in my overuse of acronyms. In the conversation I had last year, if you were daring enough to go back and watch videos of me from a year ago, one of the things that I was concerned about is that when you ask the institution, and I don't mean Southbury Training School or Lower Fairfield, I mean DDS as an institution, that we get conditioned as an institution when asked a question or presented a problem to point back at the institution for the answer. And I think, Denise, what you're highlighting there is that that we need to sort of look outside of what we have traditionally done to be able to harness the creativity, and our role as the DDS in that is to provide flexibility so that we can really individualize and tailor what we do to the person. And that has been a struggle, because not everyone has embraced that or feels comfortable in that space and sort of going out there. But these conversations around transformation right now are intended to break down some of that structure and that rigidness that you point to, Denise, and hopefully more and more of our colleagues will embrace that spirit in terms of how we move forward. And although I said I was going to try and cover all of your points, I think I only covered a couple in there, or a couple of mentions, because now I've lost track of that. But I do think that that's part of the opportunity that's here right now. One of the things that has limited creativity, both on behalf of providers, families, and the state, has been very rigid constructs about our resources and very limited resources. And this ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act funding, presents us an opportunity to try some things that we might not have felt we were able to try in years past because of the lack of funding and the lack of flexibility, both from us and the federal government. So this is, I think your question is, your concerns are opportune, and I'm hopeful that through this next couple of years that we will learn to be more flexible and responsive in our thinking and in our funding.
I would add that one of the purposes of the forums that we're holding is to spark some of that creativity, really expand what folks' perception of these service options are. And so if you'd like to reach out, if you have worked with people around some creative options, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll see if we might be able to highlight some of those options. I think when you hear directly from families and individuals around how they've created supports that work for them, it really generates some ideas, and it moves that creativity forward.
All right, Kevin.
I'm going to go to the next question before Adriana. She has her hand up, but the next question is from Lynn, and she wants to talk about IDASH housing options and about the Westville IDASH program stopped. Lynn, I don't know if you want to expand on that. Lynn, sorry, Lynn.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks for being here, Jordan, and everybody else. And Krez, we're so happy he's in the South region. I had the pleasure of meeting him at our RAC meeting last week. So anyway, Thomas Daly had got me really excited about an IDASH housing project that was coming up in Westville. And when I called Kennedy Center to see about what was going on with it, I know the one in Orange is in process, and it was stopped. And I found out from the Kennedy Center, I forgot her name, the person who was pursuing all that with the builders and everything, that something happened with the regulations that the builder wasn't following or something. But anyway, I would really love to get another one going in Westville. Carl has pretty much everything that anyone could ask for, except for staff when nobody shows up or they can't find anybody. I mean, he's got family care home health aides. He's got Marrakesh community support funding. He's got 2 great day programs, all these things. But then, you know, people call out and there's nobody. So we really, Dave and I've retired, and, you know, he's in his 70s. I'm in my late 60s. We can't just be Carl staff forever and ever and ever. It's just, we just can't keep getting these emergency calls. We don't know what to do. There's nobody here. Carl's freaked out. Why can't they come? And he's got a lot of behaviors lately since the pandemic, serious ones. So having a place where he had his own apartment and somebody was there 24/7, pretty much similar to what he had at Chapel Haven at one point, is the model we need for him now. I mean, it just, unfortunately, we've got everything set up in a beautiful apartment and a landlady and right near Chapel Haven, and it just isn't working because of the crisis of staffing.
Yeah, the staffing crisis is impactful. So while we refer to these programs as IDASH housing, I'm trying to get us to use the term mixed use housing projects because and I'll explain a little bit of why. IDASH was a specific round of federal funding targeted at a particular issue. Only a few of the projects were funded out of that particular round of funding, but we have started several other projects with other rounds of federal housing subsidies. And so it's unfair to call them all IDASH programs when they are a variety of funding rounds. And going forward, we won't see additional IDASH funding. We'll see additional mixed use housing funding.
Okay.
So there are a couple of issues around the way those are developed. First of all, there needs to be a developer that will then partner with a private agency. It's incumbent upon the developer to qualify for those rounds of funding. And there's all sorts of reasons they may be prohibited from accessing that funding. There's an application process that is scored on each of those housing rounds on specific criteria. And I'm not certain in this specific case what fell apart, but the size of the program, the type of application, what mixed use populations they'll be targeting, how they'll be screened, its access to public transportation, its use of assistive technology may be a scoring factor. There's all these things that go into the application, and Department of Housing has to evaluate those proposals, and they then determine whether or not it is acceptable through the federal program or the federal funding if they've met all those criteria. So I don't know specifically what wasn't included or why they didn't score in a way that would have allowed that project to be successful. But we are going to continue. We are so enamored by the success of some of these earlier starts for us. And as we see other models like it around the country, we really think that, as you described, someone who may not need 24/7 every day, but may some days need a backup or have access to that 24/7 staffing. These programs really do, these support systems really do provide that sort of safety net in a very natural way, in addition to a DDS qualified provider being a part of that community. There's a number of other people that we really grow as a community, and we really see that repeatedly, that it is more than just the agency and the individuals with intellectual disability that are benefiting from this type of project. So we're going to continue to put those forward. And perhaps the developer working with Kennedy Center will have more success on a future application, and I'd encourage them to continue to try and reach whatever bar has been set by Department of Housing. We're not, while we may have some access to insight in there, we're not the deciding body on those applications. That's federal guidelines, and the Department of Housing determine whether those projects can proceed or not.
Will you have something through DDS, like kind of similar for people, particularly people like Carl, who really need to have his own space? Having a roommate and everything, it was not really a good idea for Carl. There's too much emotional possibilities. So he needs his own place, but he needs that oversight as well.
Yeah. So in the applications or in the program designs that I have seen thus far, I have seen as many as 3 people in a single apartment and as few as 1 in a single apartment. And obviously there are apartments that are 2-bedroom as well. So I do think that there'll be single units in future developments. And I think we have 1 or 2 online and 5 or 6 more in the works. Do you know the exact number, Elisa?
We have quite a few in the works. 2 that are opening just about within the next month or so. And then we have projects all the way through 2025 at this point. They take a couple of years to develop, and there's a new round of applications that are due in January. I was going to also mention that as one of our ARPA initiatives, the American Rescue Plan Act, is to expand supportive housing. And when we talk about this mixed use housing or IDASH or supportive housing, it's all looking at people that have supports. It's generally 24-hour supports available, not always within their apartment, and they live in a setting that's integrated. So it's not all people with disabilities. There's a certain number of set-aside units that are available to people with IDD, but it's an inclusive community. And so in addition to the developments that are in process, we really are looking at expanding the number of opportunities to people, because we have seen just, Lynn, what you've described regarding Carl, where having too many people in the environment is not great, but having access to staff as he needs them, that's exactly what this offers. And as the commissioner said, the folks who have now moved in and have a little experience are starting to share their stories, and it's really exciting to see how effective it is. If you look at our website on the homepage under the innovative forums, the first one was on supportive housing.
Yeah, I
And
had
I
to
would-
miss it. I saw that and I was like, oh darn, I missed it.
No, but there's a recording of it.
Okay,
And so if you go to the 40-minute mark, you'll see Lauren and Scott, individuals that moved into the first iDash program that opened, and they kind of give a tour of their apartment and the supports that are in place, and it'll give you a really nice idea of what it looks like.
my final question is, how can I find out when there might be one in the area that Carl really needs to stay in that area, and it is an area right near Chapel Haven, has tons of transportation. Westville is like a great area for something like this. How would I find out when I can jump on the wagon for that one?
So anything in the greater New Haven area is where.
Yeah,
where you're looking?
particularly Westville. I mean, there are so many people that are associated with Chapel Haven and they live in apartments, and so many people like Carl that are struggling with the same issues with the staffing crisis that, I mean, you'd get a huge amount of people that want to do this in that area.
As we're chatting, I'll call up the grid with the developments that are in process, and I can let you know what's the closest to that area.
And maybe I can take your contact information too.
Sure.
We'll just we'll put it right in the chat.
Okay, I haven't met you yet, so, but I've been on a bunch of committees with DDS and stuff, so.
Yeah.
But I haven't met you yet.
And let me just clarify that the applications that you were referring to that were not successful, they may have scored high enough to be an awardee, but someone else in the same application pool scored higher. So it's very possible that the project as it was presented was viable, but somebody else submitted a project for the same round of housing that was just scored higher on whatever, on however they evaluate these. So I don't want to suggest that it wasn't a well done proposal or included all of those things, just that they may have lost out to a higher scorer.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Lynn. Give my love to the family.
Okay, thanks.
Adriana?
Good morning, all. Mine was just, I wanted to ask, going back to when Denise was talking about, and Commissioner Chef, you were discussing creative ideas. I was just curious if within DDS, when either case managers or other roles have a creative solution to a family's dilemma or situation, are those creative ideas shared throughout to like spark more creativity and share that knowledge to be able to apply it maybe to other families?
So we do try and share success stories in a variety of ways internally, so that we can gain some momentum. And it's one of the reasons why, like, you know, when we were successful with some grants we did for small business enterprise a couple of years ago, even though we didn't do additional rounds of grants because of COVID, there are families and providers who saw those success stories and replicated something similar for someone within their network. So we do try and do those. I think so I thought you were going to ask a different question than you did, and maybe it was just implied. We do run into people coming up with some creative ideas and hitting an initial roadblock and feeling like they got shut down and don't feel like the idea got had enough people look at it to see if maybe there's a way. And I will share that, you know, we are working. It takes a long time to turn a system. It takes a long time to turn a system, and we're so conditioned to saying no and being rigid because of concerns around the waivers or concerns around regulation, concerns around funding constraints, that learning to say, instead of saying no, saying maybe, let me ask, is still sometimes new. And sometimes you need to do that 3 or 4 levels up the chain. And I you know, and even there are things that come to my desk that I really want to say yes to, but can't figure out a way to say yes to, and we'll try and work through those. But so if you're hearing about what you think is a really good idea and it got shot down early and often, and you want to elevate that, you know, you can, and some of you on the call have been comfortable reaching out to me directly, but you can reach out to any of the staff on the call today and try and escalate that so that we have more eyes on it. But we really do think the spirit of the conversations we're having now are really looking at that space in the gray areas of what we do. And the federal government learned about the importance of flexibilities during the pandemic and is more receptive to a number of concepts that they were a hard no for many years, that are now a more of a maybe. We're not sure. But that's a much different place to be in with the federal government.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. No, you bring up a good point about flexibility, especially with the source of knowledge and the retirees and having an influx of new hires. It's good to maybe house it somewhere and revisit that issue and create that spark, that crowdsourcing that you're talking about.
Yeah, and just because it got a hard no 5 years ago doesn't mean it would get a hard no now, because
Exactly.
we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot over the last few years.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Kurt, is that you with your hand up?
It is. Thanks. Well, we're actually, first I should start with, so our son Chris is 22. He currently resides at Adelbrook in Cromwell, and the South Region has worked tirelessly with us, and it looks like we have a successful solution to his residential setting in the near term. So a shout out to Kathy Kalo and a thank you to everybody else. But it does expose a couple of things. So one, that we've seen, because Chris is in a residential setting that's licensed by DCF, we are now in a 30-day approval environment from month to month. DCF has to approve him staying where he is. And it all kind of relates back to the issue that first came up, which is DCF licensing ends at the age of 21, but Department of Education support for children now goes to the age of 22. So there's sort of a legislative issue for you. I'm hoping you guys can, figure out how to work together with somebody to start to make it a little easier for parents who are in that year of transition. Another item is, so Adelbrook has figured out how to create an arrangement for Chris to move into a home in Southington, which is outside of our region, but it's certainly going to be great to have them supporting him. But then we go starting to look for a day program, and the IT support at DDS to figure out how to take the information you all have and make it more, let's just say, usable to find things would be a valuable effort. And I know you've got some IT support planned in your ARPA funding. We're working with a case manager. She's kind of working around to try to find other people who might know programs in the area. I mean, irrespective of whether there's even staffing to support him, but just to find those programs. And, I know you have the spreadsheet that tracks all the agencies, but there's really no way to know where the day programs are. So anyway, so that's just another one.
Okay. So I appreciate that. Let
Yeah.
me respond to the first part first.
Okay.
So we are painfully aware of, and I've been working for years to try and improve the way DCF and DDS work together and coordinate and collaborate. And there's actually been an effort by the governor's office and the Office of Policy Management to do what we call leaning. It's a business term for thinning out bureaucratic or overly complicated systems, trying to lean the way we do licensing, the way we do, as an example of why things are more complicated than they necessarily have to be. The up until recently, the regulations and the constraints around med certification for staff was a different process for DCF than it was Department of Children and Families, than it was for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, than it was for the Department of Developmental Services, than it is for any of the employees through waivers like Katie Beckett and others hosted by DSS. So we now have a common certification, or are working towards a common certification there. With regards to the licensing, it is again one of those areas where it's complicated, and more, I would say increasingly most of the homes DCF is using are licensed by us and funded by either the lead education agency, the local education agency, or DCF, or a private payment system of some sort. And what that has allowed is for people to age in place and not have to move because they hit that relatively arbitrary 21 or 22 number, and your eyes on that moving target are good. That has created a whole other wrinkle for us, because in the middle of our conversations about how we streamline, 21 became 22, and there's a whole bunch of statutes in place that limit DCF's involvement for most people at 18. So it created a whole other set of hurdles. But we meet at a minimum monthly, trying to work through a number of those issues, both case specific and general in trend. And we're going to continue to do that. And hopefully there comes a day where a family doesn't need to know who the licensor is. They just know that it's a qualified provider in a licensed home, and that's all that will really matter. But we're working towards that, Kurt. We are not there yet. In terms of IT and the website, Kevin Bronson, who's on the call today, in addition to his role with in the department in the legislative area, is also in charge of communications, and has been working feverishly in state government. That's a kind of a weird word, but working as fast as he can through systems. We are expecting some revamping to the website. I'm not here today to promise you it's going to make it any easier to find things. The last time we had a revamping, I think people who always knew where to find something all of a sudden couldn't. And what they would find were dead links and dead ends. And Kevin is working hard to try and make that more responsive and an easier world for everybody. And there are some limitations on what we share about residential programs with regards to health protected information, HIPAA. But the day programs don't have that same constraint. And so, but they're not listed necessarily by location. They're not necessarily listed by location because it would be perhaps tied to the Kennedy Center has a main building, but may have a dozen programs scattered around multiple towns, and not all of them are listed because they're not licensed. And so the day programs are not in the way that residential programs are. But we'll take down that feedback and see if there's some way that, because I know right now shopping for day programs is really hard, especially for age.
Well, just as an example, so the way we're trying to do it, there's the master spreadsheet, which is really great because it gives you every agency and which agencies provide day services. But then you have to go to, sort of that PDF profile page for that agency. And it may even in there, it lists the towns they provide services in, but it doesn't really, it says they do day services, but you're left clueless as to, well, in any event, that's just. So one other, so Chris will now be living in Southington. We live in Stonington. We're in the South region. And our goal was to get him down here, but through the staffing and the level of support he needs, it just proved it wasn't going to happen. But we're still looking for, kind of trying to create an opportunity for him down here. And there was another family in Stonington that was very successful in creating a CRS home for their son who's deaf. So they worked through, kind of finding the house, finding the agency, and created a very successful program for him, which is I think it's in Woodbridge, Connecticut. But it's a great example of creative housing, and just using the CRS program, I think, to expand housing for, I don't know how we characterize Chris as someone who needs 24-hour services. But anyway, that's our goal. We're going to try to work on that next. Give us a couple of years.
Yeah, hopefully it's faster than that, but thank you, Kurt. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Are there other questions from the crowd today? I think we're up to date in the chat box, Kevin.
Commissioner, I believe Denise Ricker had a comment.
Oh yeah.
She said she can't get her hand up, but Denise, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you may.
Not sure what's going on. I don't do Zoom much, so under my reactions, it's like I can clap and say hooray, but that's about it. So, but what I was going to say is under this subcommittees, I'm on one of the employment subcommittees, and we were talking about that, how difficult it is to navigate the DDS website, and how, I mean, for us as employees that work there, it's difficult, let alone people that don't really know the system. And families and parents are just inundated with so much that they don't know and have to learn. And honestly, like each CM and everybody else does everything different too. So that makes it even more complicated. So what we were thinking is, how cool would it be to be able to like go onto the DDS website and under providers. I know you were saying, Jordan, that it's much more difficult to do in the residential realm, but like maybe with day providers, that if we had a map, almost like the realtor.com, like when you go to look for a housing or apartments and you just click on an area and all these things come up, like if we had something like that for providers, so somebody would be able to go on and say, oh, well, there are these 5 providers in the area, and you could click on them. And then maybe that click would send you to their link for you to get more information.
So I appreciate that. We actually have a tool, and Shannon, I see your comment about doing that with Google Maps. Google Maps will work only if it knows the locations of the day program. So we use a program called Tableau. And what Tableau does is it grabs data from a multitude of sources and then helps make it useful. So for instance, it would only work for us internally, but I was able to use it for emergency purposes to get locations of all of our group homes and be able to visualize that as opposed to just a list of addresses. We wouldn't use that publicly facing, but we could probably do something similar for day program and day program locations if we have a full list of that. And it would look like Google Maps on the website, but it would have to pull the addresses from our provider database and then load it in and identify them on the Google Maps. But we did some things like that. I was actually able to locate during the last set of hurricanes about 5 years ago. We were able to locate homes that may or may not be in the path using that tool. So that's a good suggestion, Denise, and others. And we can look to, we can add that to the list of things. And that's why we like having these conversations, because it gives us some, we want to make the work that we do meaningful to all of you. So
And one other thing that I found extremely successful that I don't know that many case managers do. I don't know that they're aware that they can do it. I do a lot of blended programs to obviously make things individualized for everybody that I work with. But as we know, there's always been issues around transportation, especially people that are competitively employed. And that's something that we've been working on. But one thing that I do is when I haven't been able to figure out anything with transportation, if they didn't need those other services or if they didn't need a job coach because they were doing well in their job, I would put in for individual day support that was non-vocational. And I would hook them up with an agency, but they would pick them up at their home, take them out into the community, have some fun or go get a cup of coffee, and then drop them off at work. So that's kind of a way around it as well. So I'm just saying about the creativity when it comes to any of our programming.
So we did run a pilot for blended services. The timing was a little inopportune because as it was completing, we were beginning our COVID days. But what that pilot allowed people to do is to, for a select group, because it was a pilot, pool both their residential allocation and their day allocation to make it one allocation, and then use it across settings to get the most out of it. And I'm not certain, Denise, that's specifically what you're talking about, but that kind of flexibility in our funding would certainly, I think, help fine tune some of the supports and services that we're able to provide and families and individuals are able to access.
That would help, but like what I was saying is like, if I put in for somebody for, say, try to get them a cab or to do the private hires and all that stuff for like, say, day programs, and Pratt would keep denying that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to give this person individual day support that's non-vocational. And so now the person's getting picked up at their home and brought to work, but then they have a service in between.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, not to necessarily blend day and res. I'm just saying, I'll have somebody that's maybe in group supported employment 2 days a week. Then I have them in individual day, like, maybe 4 hours a week and, that kind of thing. Blending within the actual allocation and not mixing the allocations.
Yep, I get it.
Okay, I'll shut up now.
You don't have to shut up, but we will add that. Kurt, I'm looking at Kurt's name. Kevin and Joe can help add that to the list of follow-up stuff that will come out of these meetings. So thank you. Adriana, you had your hand back up, or are you good? That was a legacy hand, maybe.
Oh, sorry. I was typing a comment instead. I was just asking about the realtor.com. I know we use a platform, Unitas Connecticut, that is widely taking the network of 211 as well. They work with 211. And I was curious because that you can search by different types of services and you can, refer people to using that platform. But for parents to be able to look at a subset, maybe specifically saying, DDS service day programs as a filter, and all providers, private providers can be listed in it, and it'll show, it's kind of like a realtor.com, but it gives specifics. They can click on the individual's providers. So I was just curious if maybe combining with something that's available right now.
Yeah, so we'll have someone reach out to you so we can understand that a little better, and then see if that might actually work for us. Kevin, I saw one other chat question from John, specific to DDS staff. We can follow up with Nick Gerard to get details on that. But if it helps, John, they're still doing calculations from April 1 retirements and in retirements before that for some adjustments that were needed. So I imagine they're just playing catch up, but we can find out exactly where that stands.
Commissioner, there's a comment from Diane Martin asking, will you please update us on when the Norwich DDS dental clinic will reopen, and also explain why the current hygienists can't continue doing cleanings and refer dental needs?
So I'll take the second part of that and then give the first part of that to Cress. There were a number of issues that were raised both by staff and the dentist that made me and others in the administration concerned about the services and the quality of services and the type of services we were providing there. And we needed to ensure that we were providing best practice services there. And so when we became aware of these multiple concerns, we temporarily suspended services there. Our hopes were that we would get it back online pretty quickly. The dentist who had been affiliated with it on contract was not willing to come back. And the other dentists on that same contract were also not willing to work there. So we began a recruitment process to hire our own dentist. And Cress, can you give us an update on where we're at and when you anticipate the clinic opening?
Yes, so thank you, Commissioner. We had originally hoped to reopen the dental clinic on September 1st. The recruitment process took longer than we thought, so we did send out a notice that we hope to open it for November 1st. We have, during this time, interviewed a candidate for the lead dentist position. An offer has been made, and we are currently working with her current employer to get a release date, hopefully before November 1st, so that we can get her, the dentist, trained and acclimated, and then get the dental clinic up and running. So she's already been to the dental clinic. She's met the staff. So we're moving forward as quickly as we can.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And Diane, I want you to know that the department is really committed to these clinics that we operate. There are a number of them around the state. Well aware that accessing community-based dentistry through Title 19, Medicaid, Husky, really limits not only who you may see, who takes that type of benefit, but also the amount of work that may be done and the manner in which the work is performed. So we're really committed to these. I've said it publicly for years that it's not a place where I'm willing to give ground when we look at things like privatization or things like that. I plan on operating dental clinics until all the problems with accessing proper oral health care in the private sector are ameliorated. So it will be up and running. It's been shut down much longer than anybody wanted. But we also needed to ensure that we were providing a very safe and healthy care there. And I'm certain that we have and that we will as soon as we can get this dentist on board.
I see no more comments in the chat, so.
Anything else before we say goodbye for today, folks? You hate to cut anybody off if there was any last remaining questions. And if there are not, I want to say thank you. I've tried to make it clear for years. While I have, Lena, I saw your hand pop up there.
Yes, Lena Esposito from Connecticut Family Support Network. Yes, I have some ideas. One is about get some funding for people with disabilities. It's just that, you know, that every place that we go, we have the bin when we throw it out, the plastic bottles and everything like that. Then I was thinking that if that can all have the label to be donated the money for people with disabilities, and then different organizations, they can come and do it as a part of the job for them to come and take it out, all these plastic containers and everything like that from the public places, parks, Metro North, and then that could be some money that we can be used for all that organizations. That's one of the things that that I was thinking. The other one is to pick it up the garbage, of course, in beaches and parks to the spring and summer, and they can be actually be working to in the school districts to pick out the garbage after the schools are closed. They can clean out the garbage cans and everything. And for the transportation, I'm just thinking in the kind of like a Uber rides, but maybe we can do like a plan with some people with maybe with low income, maybe they wanted to work it out and do that kind of services, especially for special people, for people with disabilities, because the Uber is too expensive, but maybe we can reach some kind of arrangement like that. That's my solution.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We have explored specialized Uber services. A couple states
Yeah.
are doing some pilots with that, where there's a special credentialing that includes a higher level background check to be an Uber driver. So you might pay a slightly higher rate, but you get someone who's had a criminal and sex offender background check done before they come to pick you up. So with that, I appreciate that. We can check in on where those things are, and I appreciate the other feedback. We'll look to incorporate that in the feedback at the end of these 6 rounds of conversations. We'll have some sort of summary document that we circulate so everybody can hear about all of the ideas shared and areas where we may need to do more work, and if anything gets left out, we'd be happy to add more back in. So thank you, Lena, for those contributions. And I want to thank everybody for their contributions today. I've said for a long time that I don't have all the answers. And someone talked about hope, and maybe that was Denise or somebody else talked about hope. I've often found that my job is to try and provide hope, but then to get as much input and feedback and work with as many partners as I can to make that hope turn into someone's positive outcome and new reality. Because I don't have all the answers and all the solutions, but I do sit in a place where I can try and facilitate that. So I want to thank everybody for their time today. I do want to urge you, if you have other families you're connected to, other providers you're connected to, we would love to see the registrations for these events even higher. They're all of the forums are mixed. As you can see today, we have staff on, there were some providers on today for sure. And there were certainly families and advocates on the call today. So encourage your friends, your colleagues, the other families, people you network with to participate in these. We really do think that the best solutions are coming from all of you, and we're just here to facilitate them. So thank you all for your time. Thank my staff who helped facilitate today, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the future. Take care.
Thank you, Commissioner. Bye, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.